Another week, another UFC Fight Night main event being announced to the public. It has come out a couple hours ago that Jack Hermansson and Brendan Allen, two top 15 middleweights, are going to face off on the UFC's event on June 3rd. It's 5 rounds, main event, it's the headliner, it's everything. We don't know where it's going to be yet. The location is unknown, so we don't know if it's going to be in the Apex or if it's going to be in front of a crowd. I'd assume it's going to be in the Apex. I think most people can agree with me when I say that this is one of those cards that you would put at the Apex. It's one of those main events you'd put there. But yeah, I don't think this is going to be on the Stockholm, Sweden card because there's been talks of that being in July, and this fight takes place in June. So June 3rd is still a nice card. It's looking pretty good so far. We've got Kai Kara France versus Amir Albazi on that card. We've got Tim Elliott versus Alan Nascimento and Mayra Buena Silva versus Misha Tate. And now we're adding this fight on top of that. It's a lot of ranked fighters on there, a lot of pretty decent fights, a lot of flyweight fights also. Yeah, it looks like a good card so far, and I want to look at both. I want to look into both these guys, why they're fighting, how good of a matchup this is. First of all, their rankings, right? So right now, Jack Hermansson is number number 10 at middleweight, and you can see Brendan Allen here is number 12. Jack Hermansson is coming off of a second-round TKO loss to number 9 Roman Dolidze. Brendan Allen is coming off of a third-round submission win over Andre Muniz, who was number 10 at the time, he was number 11 at the time. He's now dropped to number 13, and Brendan Allen is now number 12 in the division as a result of this. And Jack Hermansson, in that Roman Dolidze fight, it wasn't the most exciting fight at the start, but he was slightly winning the first round. It was a lackluster first round, but he did slightly take it in my eyes. But in the second round, when the grappling started to become a factor, they started to factor that into the fight. Roman Dolidze is just really creative on the ground. He got that really nasty calf slicer he got on top, and it was just nothing Hermansson could really do. He was stuck in an unfortunate position there, and the referee just had to step in. He also beat Chris Curtis this past July for the UFC London card. Aspinall versus Curtis Blades, July 23rd, 2022. He won that fight when Curtis stepped in on short notice, and then before that, he fought 3 times in 2022. Before that, he fought Sean Strickland, where he lost the fight by split decision. Strickland right now is number 7 in the division, I'm pretty sure. Brendan Allen is coming off of a 4-fight winning streak. He's coming off of that win over Andre Muniz, like I mentioned. He's also beating Krzysztof Jotko, Malkoun. He beat Sam Alvey as well, but then before that, he got knocked out by Chris Curtis, which is pretty interesting because Jack Hermansson did beat Chris Curtis, but MMA math doesn't always add up, so we're gonna look a bit deeper. We're not gonna rely on MMA math, obviously. Jack Hermansson, over his career, he's gotten some pretty impressive wins over guys like Chris Curtis, Edmund Shabazian, Kelvin Gastelum, Jacare, and Gerald Mearshart. Brendan Allen has come out on top over guys such as Andre Muniz, Krzysztof Jotko, Sam Alvey, Kyle Dawkins, and even Kevin Holland in his UFC debut, if y'all didn't know. Like I said, 4-fight win streak. In the UFC, he's only ever lost to strikers. Like if we look at let's go to his Tapology really quick. If we look at his losses, he's only ever been knocked out. It was from strikers. Chris Curtis back in 2021, and also Sean Strickland back in 2020. He's only ever lost to strikers. And if you guys know anything about Jack Hermansson, he's not really a striker. He's not the best striker. He's not really known for his striking, for his punches. In fact, his last knockout win was in 2018 over a guy that isn't even in the UFC anymore. It was against Thales Leites. It was by ground and pound in the 3rd round with just 3 minutes left, under 3 minutes left. So if Hermansson wants to win this fight realistically, he'd probably have to go for either a boring decision win or a submission, whatever it is. He'd have to take the fight to the ground. He'd have to implement some of the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu, right? But right now, Allen is coming off of submission win over one of the best guys, one of the best grapplers in the middleweight division right now in Andre Muniz. So for Jack Hermansson, it's going to be pretty difficult to submit Brendan Allen. He's also never been submitted in the UFC before. In fact, his only submission loss was in his 3rd ever fight professionally against Trevin Giles. It was back in 2016. Since then, he's never lost by a submission. In fact, if we look at his fights after that submission loss, a lot of them were submission wins. So who knows, But Jack Hermansson, I think this is pretty obvious, but he's clearly had more overall experience in MMA. He debuted many years earlier. He's also fought much higher level guys. You know, if we look at just his resume, not even guys he's beaten, but just guys he's fought. Roman Dolidze, Chris Curtis, Sean Strickland, Edmund Shabazian, Marvin Vettori, Kelvin Gastelum, Jared Cannonier, Jacare, Jerome Mearshart, Thiago Santos even. It just goes that far. He's fought. He debuted in the UFC 3 years earlier. I think a bit more than 3 years earlier. He's also fought just way higher level guys. Brendan Allen hasn't fought that same level of fighters at middleweight, or even guys like Thiago Santos who are light heavyweights like now, you know. So Jack Hermansson clearly has more experience against the more high level fighters, but at the moment, I just think Brendan Allen is the better fighter right now. Whether it comes to striking or grappling, I think Brendan Allen is just much better in those departments as of right now. I think in this fight, he's going to show a lot of people how much he's improved over his UFC career in this fight. So a bit of an early submission here. I'd say round 1 or round early prediction. Did I say early submission? A bit of an early prediction for me here. I'll say round 2 or round 3 submission for Brendan Allen in this fight. It would depend really on how Jack Hermansson shows up. If he shows up with that dog in him, I don't know if he's going to show up better or worse than Andre Muniz showed up. I'd assume he'd probably show up just a bit worse in the grappling. But who knows? You saw how Brendan Allen did in that fight. He did much better. He won, I think, pretty much every round in that fight. If I remember correctly, he won every round against Andre Muniz. And I don't expect anything different from Jack Hermansson. Jack Hermansson doesn't get a lot of finishes. His last submission win was against Kelvin Gastelum back in 2020. And his last knockout win was even longer ago, like I talked about. 2018. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't really see him getting a decision win, but I do see him getting finished. We saw him get finished in his last fight, so I don't really expect anything different from a guy like Brendan Allen, who's much more skilled on the ground than a guy like, let's say, Roman Dolidze or Sean Strickland or even Chris Curtis. So I think Brendan Allen is just going to show levels. He's going to show that he is a guy to look at in middleweight. He's going to become a pretty interesting prospect to look at after this fight. Jack Hermansson, will he retire after this fight? Who knows? I don't think so. I think he's got 1 or 2 left in him, maybe even 3 after this fight. But yeah, early prediction, Brendan Allen takes it by a mid-fight submission. Jack Hermansson will keep going in his career, but I don't know. I don't see him having a long future left in the UFC. I expect it to be not as active as he was in 2022. He might have just one more fight in 2023. He fought 3 times in 2022. I expect this year he's going to fight much less. He's getting older as well. He's only 34, but he's had such a long, extensive career, more than 30 fights. And he's also fought, like I said, a lot of tough guys at middleweight. So it's just a long, and it's taxing on your body. It's a long career. So who knows? Brendan Allen is still young. He's only 27. So he's still got a lot to learn in his career. And I think after this fight, he's just going to become a problem at middleweight. So, yeah, early prediction there. It's looking like a good card so far. I already said, Kai Kara France is on that card. Misha Tate, Mayra Bueno Silva, Tim Elliott, Amir Albazi, Alan Nascimento. A lot of good fights on that card so far. It's crazy how the only fights that have been announced for that card so far are just bangers and only ranked people. So, yeah, pretty interesting there. But nice fight night here. Not the most, not the biggest, most name-valued main event. I think Kai Kara France versus Amir Albazi probably should have been the main event instead. And if not, at least now that we've seen the main event, that's got to be the co-main event. Especially since, this fight night's probably going to be in the Apex. So make them the co-main event. Kai Kara France, he deserves it, man. And, yeah, early prediction. Brendan Allen's going to win by submission in somewhere in the middle of the fight, 2nd, 3rd round, maybe even 4th, who knows. But, yeah, I'm pretty sure. Or no, I'm almost certain that it's going to be a very fun card.